And in today's vlog, the one skill that we're going to focus in on is objection handling.
Well, almost had a bloody heart attack. Thought I was going to get a fine for vlogging whilst driving.
Never, ever say the other person is wrong. Hey there, welcome to Finding Pharma, the channel that is more exciting than finding a forgotten $20 in your back pocket. I'm David Tong, and I'm an oncology key account manager. Today, different to many of my other vlogs, we're staying in Sydney and we're off to Prince of Wales Hospital in Randwick. I'm going to give you a bit of a flavour for what a day in the life of a pharma sales rep looks like. Now, I work in specialty care, but I'm going to try relate my examples to be specific to GP sales, as that is the role I believe most of you are striving towards. Now, there's a lot of skills needed to be successful in pharma sales. And in today's vlog, the one skill that we're going to focus in on is objection handling. On top of that, I'm going to show you some of the work perks that we get, and also watch to the very end because I'm going to cover the one key question that is always asked in first-time GP sales interviews. So pack your bags and let's get going. Now let's talk about some of the perks in pharma. As you've seen on many of the guest interviews that I've done with senior leaders, the reason why they got into pharma is because they got a company car. And that's still the case today. You can still get a company car. But on the other hand, if you already have an existing car, a pretty cool perk is getting a car allowance, which is quite significant. Usually it's about $20,000 on top of your base salary, and that's to cover your petrol, your car insurance, and things like that. I think the thing to be aware of is when you're deciding between a car allowance or a car, what we term a tool of trade, is how much travel are you going to be doing? I think if you're going for a GP sales role, the car allowance is definitely the more economical way of going because you have less distance to travel. So of that $20,000, you might be able to pocket some of that. On the other hand, if you're in specialty care, you're driving quite large distances, having a tool of trade is probably more favorable because you will also be given a petrol card. Now, $20,000 is just the rough yardstick. I know some companies like Sanofi, they give $17,000 plus a fuel card. I know other companies give $24,000, $25,000. So this is just an approximation, but still not something that's insignificant. So we've just parked, made it to Prince of Wales Hospital. As I've said on a few other vlogs, hospital parking or parking near the hospital is always a nightmare. I had a 30-minute buffer, which is now reduced to 15 minutes, let's just say. I thought I'd also take this opportunity to talk a little bit about objection handling. I know that's a big question I often get asked. And I have done a really detailed episode on the framework that I use, which is summarized by the word APACT. I think if I give one tip, it would be really your mindset and seeking to understand. That should be the mindset. Where in APACT, the P standing for probe is asking lots of questions. I would spend 80% of my time on the probing. If I'm to dig a little deeper, this is my first meeting with this particular doctor, I think I do three things to give myself a bit of confidence. And that would be, number one, have a list of possible objections in my head with the response that I'm going to use. I think in sport, we always know winners anticipate, losers react. So at least having some things that I can quickly call on up my sleeve, that would be my first tip. My second tip would be in between the probing and answering the objection, I would just clarify that you fully understood the objection. Don't fall into the trap that I've done before where, a doctor has said to me, this drug is terrible, I'd never recommend it to my worst enemy. And I jumped straight into trying to answer the objection by saying, hey doctor, let me show you the reasons why it's so good for X, Y, and Z reason. And at the end of that, he said, David, I was only kidding. I just don't like the name of the drug. So had I probed a little bit deeper and said something like, so doctor, my understanding of why you don't like the drug is X, Y, Z, then I probably would have prevented myself from making such a silly faux pas. Anyways, I'm here now. I will have to chat to you guys a little bit later. Now, one golden rule that I forgot to mention when you are objection handling is never ever say the other person is wrong. Instead, use these two phrases. You can say, I thought otherwise, but I may be wrong. Please tell me more. Or the second one that I like to use is, I don't hear that very often, but please tell me more. And with both of these lines, you're putting yourself on the same side as the doctor. You never want to be on the opposite side, otherwise they think you're attacking them. So you're putting yourself on the same side, also making it clear that this is a very uncommon thing that you've heard, but you're open to hearing their suggestion. But I think in the world of communication, it is so important to truly understand the perspective of the other person. But that doesn't mean you have to agree with that perspective. So just finished up with the doctor. Thank God, no curly objections. And now it's time to treat myself to some work perks. When you're trying to build rapport with someone, it's really important to match and mirror their behavior. In today's example, I decided to hold off on eating because I'm a little bit tired of having cold food all the time. And so I asked the kitchen to hold off on my food. Now, I know many of us have friends who work at big law firms, at software companies where they've got in-house chefs, and that's a pretty cool work perk. But I think in pharma sales, we get perhaps even better food perks in that we get to go to nice cafes like this one here, and every day's a new cafe, every day's a new menu, versus having an in-house chef is probably a menu that's on rotation. So there's definitely some cool work perks for pharma sales that definitely cannot be overlooked if you're a bit of a foodie. And it doesn't stop with just food. You have coffee all the time with doctors and other healthcare professionals. I used to have 2, 3, 4 coffees a day. I found myself having to pull back, otherwise I'd be bouncing off the walls. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you, GP sales is less eating in cafes like this, and probably more eating in the surgeries, but still, you'll have the lunch paid by work. And what's cool about eating in surgeries is the menu's in your hands. Nando's, fishbowl, El Jana's, whatever you choose, or potentially whatever the doctors choose. Hopefully, they have good taste. Nice feed and beautiful day. One of the really interesting questions you guys have asked me is, what sort of admin work do we need to do in pharma sales? And as I mentioned, there weren't any curly objections in this call, but the doctor had some interesting questions for me, which I didn't actually know the answer to. And I think in this industry, it's way too easy to make promises and say, I'll get that information to you and never get back to them. But one of the really key aspects of meeting someone for the first time is building trust. And I think part of that is you can't make empty promises. If you promise to get certain information, you must follow up, and follow up as quick as you can. Ideally, I have a rule of 24 hours to get back to them. So I'm going to sit down now, take some meticulous notes, because we did discuss a lot of things, and super easy to forget what you talked about if you don't take good notes. So all pharmaceutical companies will have a CRM system, Customer Relations Management System, which seems to be Viva as the common platform. I used to have a very bad habit where I would rush from appointment to appointment and do my notes at the very end of the day. But what I found was the quality of my notes by the end of the day, given how busy I was, dropped significantly because I started to forget things, or I started to jumble conversations. So now, as part of my best practice, is as soon as you finish the call, slow down and take the 5-10 minutes that you need to write the notes and log whatever you need to log in the system. That's part and parcel of some of the hygiene work that needs to be done in our role, or administrative work. So I'm going to smash this out. And then, as I've said on other episodes, our car is our office. I'm going to get on the phone and speak to some of my teammates in our MSL. I think a really important trait of good salespeople is collaboration and teamwork, being able to bring in different stakeholders.
I do also have a call with legal and compliance about some dinner meetings I have planned. So stakeholder management and being able to balance all these different parties and what their priorities are, and having a good relationship with them so that you can lean on their expertise when you do have questions or face roadblocks is really important. So some of the other administrative tasks we have in our role as sales professionals, given we are customer facing, is to prioritize our customers and look after them. And this particular doctor has asked me to reach out to some nurses who he thinks would benefit from an educational update. And so I'm going to drop everything and send off some emails to figure out what time works best for these nurses and what information that they need. I think from a GP sales representative perspective, you'll also have nurses to call on in each of the GP clinics, and you'll be really surprised to know how much these nurses know. They often have a lot more patient contact than doctors themselves. So the insights that they can give you around the patient journey, challenges that the patients are having, is really invaluable to your role and trying to understand the whole ecosystem. So whilst there is a heavy focus from pharmaceutical companies to call on doctors as the key prescriber, don't underestimate the value of the surrounding stakeholders, nurses, pharmacists. Super important. Okay, so we made it back in one piece, and it was a bit of a quiet day for me. One oncologist, one pharmacist. In GP sales, the expectation is slightly higher, and it's usually around a measurement of seeing 8 to 12 doctors a day. And that's largely because there are far more GPs than there are specialists. There's probably 35,000 GPs in Australia versus 5,000 specialists per therapy area. And actually, on the topic of metrics, I promised to share one of the most commonly asked GP sales interview questions. And that is, tell us about a time that you hit a KPI or surpassed a KPI, and how did you do that? Now, the hiring team here, what they're really looking for is that you have an understanding of how sales works, you can operate under pressure, and my tip here, I have 3 tips for you. Number 1, always follow the STAR format. That's situation, task, action, result. Second to that is have a think about the qualities that you need to be successful in pharmaceutical sales. So resilience, problem solving, analytical skills, collaboration, and see if you can weave these skills into your STAR example. And the third piece would be, make sure the example that you give relates closely to GP sales. So let me give you an example of how I would answer this question, just thinking off the top of my head. So situation, when I worked at Rebel Sport as a shop assistant, I was responsible for looking after the footwear department. My manager wanted us to grow sales by 10%. This is when we were declining in sales by 5%, given the competitive environment of online retailers. So what I did was, I looked at our entire footwear range and I narrowed down to the top 5 most profitable footwear items. Once I identified these 5, I brought together our entire footwear department and showed them the analysis that I had done and how we could achieve the 10% growth if we just focused on driving sales of these 5 models. I then reached out to the sales representatives of these 5 brands and had them come in to upskill us on the features of each shoe. The team, upskilled and aligned, started promoting and really had laser-like focus on these 5 shoes. At the end of 12 months, we had actually grown sales by 20%. That's double what the manager had expected of us. And I'm really proud of this result because my manager gave me a promotion. And I think this particular result and example relates closely to pharmaceutical sales. Number 1, I showed my resilience. I never gave up, even when the sales were declining. And I know in pharmaceutical sales, there is a lot of rejection and pushback. Stay enthusiastic and push through these challenges. Number 2, my business analytics and identifying the 5 key brands that would get us the result we needed. And I think in pharmaceutical sales, given the large territories that we're going to have, it's really important to focus on our top key accounts, where there are the most prescribers, where there are the highest patient numbers. Thirdly is the collaboration and bringing together my footwear team to align on the strategy and execute it together. And I know in pharmaceutical sales, it's really important to work with not only your team, your pod, but also your MSL, your medical colleagues, and your marketing colleagues, so that we are all aligned and we can synergize together to drive the result we want for the brand. So that's just a super quick example that I made up. Feel free to steal it shamelessly. Just make sure you drop a comment below and let me know how it goes. Now, understanding objection handling and how to answer interview questions might get you your first pharma sales job, but is it going to keep you there? I'd argue no. You really need to show results, and how you do that is closing deals. Click here as I share my 10 years of pharma sales experience on how to effectively close deals.